Friday arrived with merciless efficiency. Elena woke to find a schedule taped to her bedroom door, printed in Damien's sharp handwriting, every hour accounted for. 9 a.m., final dress fitting. 11 a.m., hair and makeup trial. 2 p.m., rehearsal at the ceremony site. 7 p.m., rehearsal dinner with immediate family and close friends. Tomorrow, she'd be married. The thought sat in her stomach like a stone. She'd barely seen Damien since the photo shoot 2 nights ago. He'd made himself scarce, working late, leaving early, communicating only through terse text messages about logistics. Running away, Elena realized. From the conversation they'd started, from whatever was building between them that neither knew how to name. Fine. She could play that game too. The dress fitting was quick, the Ellie Saab gown fit perfectly, requiring only minor adjustments to the bustle. Elena stood on the platform while the seamstress pinned and tucked, feeling like a sacrifice being prepared for an altar. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," the seamstress said kindly. "Mr. Russo is a very lucky man." "Is he?" Elena studied her reflection. The dress was exquisite, transforming her into something ethereal and untouchable. A bride. A wife. A possession. "I'm not sure luck has anything to do with it." The hair and makeup trial took longer. Celeste had hired a team, 2 hairstylists, a makeup artist, and someone whose entire job seemed to be holding mirrors and offering encouragement. They debated updos versus loose waves, dramatic eyes versus natural glow, until Elena wanted to scream that it didn't matter because this whole thing was a farce anyway. But she smiled and nodded and let them transform her into the perfect society bride. By 1:45, Elena was back at the fortress, changed into a simple white sundress for the rehearsal. She found Damien in his office, the first door on the left, west wing, the room she'd been told was off limits. He didn't hear her at first. He was on the phone, speaking rapid fire in what sounded like Mandarin, pacing in front of his desk like a caged panther. The office was all dark wood and leather, walls lined with bookshelves and framed patents. Awards and accolades that meant nothing compared to the one thing he really wanted, revenge. Elena knocked on the open door. Damien's head snapped up, his eyes widening slightly when he saw her. He said something quick into the phone and hung up. "You're not supposed to be in here," he said, but there was no heat in it. "You scheduled a rehearsal in 15 minutes. I figured I should know where my future husband was." Elena leaned against the doorframe. "Nice office. Very evil mastermind planning world domination. I prefer misunderstood genius with boundary issues." Damien's smile was tired. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usual perfect posture slightly slumped. "Give me 5 minutes to change. I'll meet you in the garden." "Damien." Elena stepped into the office. "Are you okay?" "Fine. Why wouldn't I be?" "Because you look like you haven't slept in days. Because you've been avoiding me since the photo shoot. Because tomorrow you're getting married as part of an elaborate revenge scheme, and I'm starting to think even you're not sure if that's what you want anymore." "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't psychoanalyze me, Elena. You're not my therapist. No, I'm your fiancé. Fake fiancé, whatever. But I'm the person who's going to stand next to you tomorrow and promise forever, even though we both know it's a lie. I think that earns me the right to ask if you're okay." Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed, running a hand over his head in that gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when he was struggling. "I'm not okay," he admitted quietly. "I thought I would be. I thought this would feel triumphant, satisfying. But instead, I just feel tired. And confused. And like I'm about to make a mistake I can't take back." "You can take it back," Elena said softly. "Right now. Today. We call it off, I tell my father to figure out his own mess, and you find another way to get your revenge." One that doesn't involve destroying two lives in the process. Your father would lose everything. My father deserves to lose everything. The words surprised Elena with their vehemence. I've spent the last week realizing that. He gambled with money that wasn't his, made enemies he couldn't handle, and when it all came crashing down, he sold me to save himself. That's not a man who deserves protection. That's a man who deserves exactly what he gets. Damien moved closer, studying her face. You've changed. Since that first day in your father's study. You're harder now. Sharper. You mean I'm finally seeing things clearly instead of through the rose-colored glasses of denial? Elena held his gaze. Yeah. Turns out being treated like property has a way of stripping away illusions. I never meant to, he stopped, jaw clenching. That's not true. I did mean to. I meant to make you collateral damage. I just didn't expect. Didn't expect what? To care. The word seemed to cost him. I didn't expect to care about you. About your feelings, your happiness, your future. It wasn't part of the plan. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. So what do we do about that? Nothing. Damien stepped back, rebuilding his walls in real time. We stick to the plan. Get married tomorrow. 7 months of playing house. Then divorce and you get your life back. And what about these feelings you just admitted to having? We ignore them. His voice was flat. Like I said before, caring about you makes you my weakness. I can't afford that. What if I don't want to be ignored? Elena heard the challenge in her own voice. What if I'm tired of pretending? What if I want to see where this goes? Elena. I'm not saying I love you. I'm not even saying I like you most of the time. But there's something here. Something real. And we're both too intelligent to pretend otherwise. Something real that's built on a foundation of revenge and manipulation, Damien countered. That's not love, Elena. That's Stockholm Syndrome and proximity and two lonely people mistaking intensity for connection. Maybe. Elena moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his eyes. Or maybe it's two broken people recognizing each other. Two survivors finding comfort in shared trauma. Maybe it's messy and complicated and completely inadvisable. But it's still real. Damien's hand came up to cup her face, that same gentle touch from the photo shoot, the one that made her breath catch. If I let myself feel this, he said quietly, if I let myself care about you the way I'm starting to, I'll lose my focus. I'll start making decisions based on what's best for you instead of what hurts your father most. And 30 years of planning, 30 years of building myself into someone powerful enough to destroy him, it will all be for nothing. Maybe it should be for nothing. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Maybe you've been so focused on revenge that you forgot to build a real life. And maybe I'm the excuse you've been looking for to finally let it go. Or maybe you're the ultimate temptation, designed to make me forget what I owe to that 7-year-old boy who watched his father die. Damien's thumb traced her cheekbone. Either way, this is dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. Elena leaned into his touch despite her better judgment. What's one more risk? For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. His eyes dropped to her mouth, his breath quickened, his other hand moved to her waist. The air between them crackled with tension and possibility. Then his phone rang, an obnoxious, jarring sound that shattered the moment. Damien stepped back, checking the screen. It's the wedding coordinator. We're late for the rehearsal. His voice was carefully neutral, the walls. Back up. We should go. Yeah. Elena's voice was unsteady. We should. They walked to the garden in loaded silence, the almost kiss hanging between them like a ghost. The garden had been transformed, white chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch woven with roses and calla lilies, the valley providing a backdrop so beautiful it hurt to look at. Celeste was waiting with Damien's assistant Marco, Elena's mother, Michael, who'd arrived that morning from Princeton, and a handful of other people Elena didn't recognize. Probably the business associates who were being paid to play close friends in this elaborate charade. There you are. Celeste clapped her hands together. Okay, let's run through this quickly. Mr. Russo, you'll stand here at the arch with officiant Harrison. Elena, you'll enter from the house with your brother as escort. Michael, you're giving your sister away since your father. She trailed off delicately. Since my father isn't invited to my wedding, Elena finished. It had been her one condition when she'd signed the contract: Richard wasn't welcome. She couldn't watch him smile through her sacrifice like it was a victory. Michael can give me away. Her brother squeezed her hand. At 21, he was still young enough to believe in heroes and justice, old enough to understand that their family was falling apart. You don't have to do this, he'd said when he arrived. We can figure something out. I can drop out of school, get a job. No. Elena had been firm. This isn't your burden to carry. Stay in school. Build your life. Let me handle this. Now, watching him walk through the rehearsal with practice steps, Elena felt a surge of protectiveness. Michael would be okay. He'd graduate, build a career, have the normal life that had been stolen from her. That's what mattered. They ran through the ceremony twice: where to stand, when to speak, how to time the vows. Elena's mother wept quietly through both run-throughs, and Damien remained stoically professional, treating it like a business presentation. And then the kiss, Celeste said brightly. Just a short one for the rehearsal, save the real romance for tomorrow. Elena and Damien stood facing each other at the arch, the entire wedding party watching expectantly. He took her hands, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles, a gesture that had become familiar, almost comfortable. Ready? He asked quietly. Not even a little bit. But Elena tilted her face up anyway. Damien leaned in, his lips brushing hers so briefly it was barely a kiss at all. Just a whisper of contact, over before it began. But even that fleeting touch sent electricity racing through her veins. Perfect. Celeste was already moving on to the next detail. Now, the recessional. They continued through the rehearsal in a daze. When it finally ended, people scattered, some to check on last-minute details, others to change for dinner. Elena found herself alone with Damien by the arch, the sun setting behind them in shades of pink and gold. That was harder than I expected, Damien admitted. Which part? The pretending or the almost not pretending? Both. He turned to look at her fully. Elena, about earlier. In my office. I shouldn't have. Don't. Elena held up a hand. Don't apologize for being honest. Don't take it back. Just, let it exist. Okay. We don't have to act on it or analyze it or make decisions about it. We just let it be there, this thing neither of us planned for. That's not how I operate. I need plans, strategies, clear objectives. I know. Elena smiled sadly. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe you've spent so long planning revenge that you forgot how to just be. To let things happen naturally. To take risks without knowing the outcome. Risk-taking is how you lose everything. But Damien's voice lacked conviction. Risk avoidance is how you end up alone in a glass fortress, surrounded by expensive things but no real connections. Elena touched his face. Professional, treating it like a business presentation. And then the kiss, Celeste said brightly. Just a short one for the rehearsal, save the real romance for tomorrow. Elena and Damien stood facing each other at the arch, the entire wedding party watching expectantly. He took her hands, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles, a gesture that had become familiar, almost comfortable. Ready? He asked quietly. Not even a little bit. But Elena tilted her face up anyway. Damien leaned in, his lips brushing hers so briefly it was barely a kiss at all. Just a whisper of contact, over before it began. But even that fleeting touch sent electricity racing through her veins. Perfect. Celeste was already moving on to the next detail. Now, the recessional. They continued through the rehearsal in a daze. When it finally ended, people scattered, some to check on last-minute details, others to change for dinner. Elena found herself alone with Damien by the arch, the sun setting behind them in shades of pink and gold. That was harder than I expected, Damien admitted. Which part? The pretending or the almost not pretending? Both. He turned to look at her fully. Elena, about earlier. In my office. I shouldn't have. Don't. Elena held up a hand. Don't apologize for being honest. Don't take it back. Just, let it exist. Okay. We don't have to act on it or analyze it or make decisions about it. We just let it be there, this thing neither of us planned for. That's not how I operate. I need plans, strategies, clear objectives. I know. Elena smiled sadly. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe you've spent so long planning revenge that you forgot how to just be. To let things happen naturally. To take risks without knowing the outcome. Risk-taking is how you lose everything. But Damien's voice lacked conviction. Risk avoidance is how you end up alone in a glass fortress, surrounded by expensive things but no real connections. Elena touched his face. Mirroring his gesture from earlier. You're scared. I get it. But so am I. We're both terrified. Maybe we could be terrified together instead of alone. Before Damien could respond, Marco appeared. Mr. Russo. The car is ready to take everyone to the restaurant. They're expecting us in 20 minutes. Right. Damien cleared his throat, stepping away from Elena's touch. We should change. The dinner reservations are for 7:30. He walked away, leaving Elena standing alone at the arch where tomorrow she'd marry him. Where tomorrow she'd promise forever to a man who'd already told her their relationship had an expiration date. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Elena shivered despite the warm evening air. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, she had one last chance to back out, to run, to choose herself instead of her family's salvation. But as she walked back to the house to change for dinner, Elena realized she wasn't going to run. Not because she had to stay, but because somewhere in the past week, she'd started to care about the broken man who'd built a fortress around his heart. Maybe that made her stupid. Maybe that made her brave. Or maybe it just made her human, capable of seeing past revenge and pain to the person underneath, the one who cooked dinner and filled bookshelves and admitted he didn't know how to stop being afraid. The rehearsal dinner would be another performance. Tomorrow's wedding would be the same. But somewhere between the lies and the pretending, Elena was starting to believe that something real was growing. Something neither of them had planted, neither could control, and neither knew how to kill. 7 months suddenly seemed both too long and not nearly long enough. Elena went upstairs to change, her heart full of contradictions, her mind racing with possibilities, her future uncertain in ways both terrifying and thrilling. One more night until forever. Or at least, until the very elaborate pretense of forever. She couldn't. She couldn't wait. She was terrified. Both were true. Both were real. And maybe that was the point. The rehearsal dinner was held at Oriole, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Damien had reserved the entire private dining room, a space of understated elegance with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown skyline. Elena arrived in a midnight blue cocktail dress that hugged her curves, her hair styled in loose waves, diamonds at her throat and ears, borrowed from her mother's collection, one of the few pieces Richard hadn't pawned to cover his debts. She looked every inch the sophisticated society bride, even if her stomach was churning with anxiety. Damien was already there, commanding the room in a perfectly tailored black suit, no tie, the top buttons of his white shirt undone to reveal the edge of his tattoos. He was holding court with some business associates, but his eyes found her the moment she entered, and something flickered in them, heat, appreciation, something Elena was starting to recognize as desire. "You're late," he said when she approached, but his voice was soft, teasing. "Fashionably late. There's a difference." Elena accepted the champagne flute he offered her. "Who are all these people?" "Investors, mostly. A few tech executives I do business with. My lawyer, Harrison." Damien nodded toward a distinguished black man in his 60s. "And Marcus, my Marcus, the driver, I insisted he be here. He's the closest thing I have to family." Elena's heart twisted at that admission. No family. No real friends, just business associates and employees. What a lonely existence he'd built for himself. "And that's Aisha," Damien continued, gesturing to a stunning woman in her early 30s with dark skin and an elegant afro, deep in conversation with Michael. "My CFO and, occasionally, my conscience when I'm being particularly ruthless." "Does she know about the revenge plot?" "Aisha knows everything. She tried to talk me out of this." Damien's jaw tightened. "Said I was making a mistake, using you as a weapon. Told me I'd end up hurting myself more than I hurt your father." Smart woman. The smartest. Which is why I ignored her advice completely. But there was no humor in his voice. "Come on. Let's get this over with." The dinner was a masterclass in performance art. Damien played the devoted fiancé perfectly, his hand on the small of Elena's back, his fingers intertwined with hers, the way he leaned in to whisper things that made her laugh, even though half of them were sarcastic observations about the guests. To anyone watching, they were madly in love. And the terrifying part? It was starting to feel less like acting. "To Damien and Elena," Harrison said, raising his glass for a toast midway through dinner. "I've known Damien for 15 years, watched him build an empire from nothing. But I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past few months. Elena, whatever magic you're working, keep it up. You've made a new man out of him. If only they knew." Elena smiled and raised her glass, playing the blushing bride while internally screaming at the absurdity of it all. Aisha went next. "I'm going to keep this short because Damien hates sentimentality." She smiled at Elena with genuine warmth. "But I want to say this, Damien Russo is the most brilliant, infuriating, loyal person I've ever met. He's also terrible at letting people in. So the fact that he's here, about to marry you, means you're special. Don't let him push you away when things get hard. And they will get hard, because he's a stubborn ass who thinks he has to carry everything alone." "Aisha," Damien warned, but there was affection in his voice. "Just speaking truth." Aisha winked at Elena. "Welcome to the family, such as it is. We're dysfunctional as hell, but we're loyal." Margaret went next, her voice trembling slightly. "Elena has always been my brave one. One. My strong one. The daughter who could handle anything life threw at her." She looked at Damien, and something hard flashed in her eyes. "Damien, I'm trusting you with my most precious gift. Don't make me regret it." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Damien met her gaze evenly. "I won't, Mrs. Hartwell. You have my word." Lies. All lies. But beautifully delivered. Michael's toast was simpler. "Elena, you're the best sister anyone could ask for." "And Damien?" He looked at his future brother-in-law with the kind of earnest sincerity only a 21-year-old could manage. "You better treat her right, or you'll have to answer to me." "Duly noted," Damien said solemnly, though Elena saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "I'll be sure to tremble in fear." After the toasts, the dinner continued with multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Elena pushed food around her plate, too nervous to eat. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd be married. Tomorrow her life would officially belong to someone else for the next 7 months. You need to eat, Damien murmured in her ear. You're already too thin. Stress eating would be better than stress starving. I'm not hungry. Neither am I. His hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. But we have to keep up appearances. So take a bite, smile, and pretend this is the happiest night of your life. Elena did as instructed, mechanically eating while making conversation with the guests. Aisha cornered her during dessert, a chocolate mousse that was probably divine but tasted like sawdust in Elena's mouth. Can we talk? Aisha asked quietly. Privately. They excused themselves to the ladies' room, an opulent space with marble counters and gold fixtures. Aisha checked that they were alone before turning to Elena with serious eyes. How much do you know? She asked bluntly. About why Damien is really marrying you. Elena's stomach dropped. Everything. I know about his family, about my father, about the revenge. I'm not an innocent bystander, I'm a willing participant. Willing or coerced? Aisha's voice was gentle. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your father sold you to pay his debts. Both. Neither. Does it matter? Elena's laugh was bitter. I'm here. I signed the contract. Tomorrow I'll say, I do, and spend the next 7 months playing house with a man who hates my last name. He doesn't hate you, Aisha said firmly. That's what worries me. What do you mean? Aisha sighed, leaning against the marble counter. I've known Damien since he was 27, a kid with his first big success and no idea how to handle it. I've watched him build walls around his heart so thick I wondered if he'd ever let anyone in. Then you came along, and suddenly those walls are cracking. We're not, Elena struggled for words. This is just an arrangement. A business transaction. Is it? Aisha's knowing look made Elena's face heat. Because I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. I've seen him check his phone constantly, hoping you've texted. I've heard him on calls with the wedding planner, obsessing over details, making sure your favorite flowers were included, your favorite music, your favorite food. That's not business, Elena. That's a man falling in love and trying desperately to pretend he's not. Elena's heart hammered. He told me caring about me makes me his weakness. That he can't afford to feel anything real because it would derail his revenge. And you believed him? Aisha laughed softly. Honey, that man has been lying to himself for so long, he doesn't know the difference between his story and the truth anymore. He thinks he wants revenge. What he really wants is to stop hurting. And you make him feel things other than rage. That terrifies him. So what am I supposed to do? Elena asked helplessly. I can't fix him. I can't heal 30 years of trauma. And I can't build a real relationship on a foundation of man. At least you two are honest with each other about the mess you're in. That's more than most couples have. Honest? We're performing a lie for the entire world. But not for each other. Aisha touched Elena's arm gently. When you're alone, when the cameras are off and the guests have gone home, you're honest then. You see each other's damage and you don't run. That's rare, Elena. That's precious. Don't throw it away because the origin story isn't fairy tale perfect. Before Elena could respond, the door opened and Margaret entered. Aisha smiled professionally and excused herself, leaving mother and daughter alone. What was that about? Margaret asked, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. Just, wedding talk. Elena's mind was reeling from Aisha's words. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think people can really change? Can someone who spent their whole life pursuing revenge suddenly decide to choose something different? Margaret set down her lipstick, meeting Elena's eyes in the mirror. I think people can change when they find something worth changing for. The question is whether Damien Rousseau believes you're worth it. And if he doesn't, then you survive the 7 months and rebuild your life after. Margaret turned to face her directly. But Elena? I've been watching him tonight. The way he touches you, looks at you, orbits around you like you're the sun, and he's finally found warmth after 30 years in the cold. That man is already changing. He just hasn't admitted it to himself yet. They returned to the dinner to find dessert finished and people beginning to leave. Damien was saying goodbye to guests, all charm and gratitude, the perfect host. But when his eyes found Elena across the room, his mask slipped for just a moment, and she saw something raw and real underneath. Want. Need. Fear. She recognized it because she felt exactly the same. The dinner wound down. Michael hugged Elena goodnight, making her promise to call if she needed anything. Margaret kissed her forehead, whispering, "Be brave, my darling girl. Whatever happens, I'm proud of you." Finally, it was just Elena and Damien in the restaurant's private room, surrounded by the debris of an elaborate performance. Empty champagne glasses, abandoned plates, flickering candles burning down to nothing. "That went well," Damien said, loosening his collar. "Everyone bought it. No one suspects this is anything but a genuine love story. Everyone except Aisha." Elena picked up her clutch. "She cornered me in the bathroom. Told me you're falling in love with me and lying to yourself about it." Damien went very still. Aisha should mind her own business. Should she? Or is she just brave enough to say what we're both thinking? Elena moved closer, emboldened by champagne and the surreal intimacy of the evening. "Are you falling in love with me, Damien?" "Don't." His voice was strained. "Don't ask me questions I can't answer honestly." "Can't? Or won't?" "Both." He turned away, staring out at the city lights. "Elena, tomorrow we get married. Tomorrow this becomes legally binding. If I admit to having feelings for you now, it changes everything. It makes this real in a way I'm not prepared for. What if I want it to be real?" The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them. "What if I'm tired of pretending? What if I think maybe Aisha is right, and we're both feeling something neither of us planned for, and maybe that's not a disaster, maybe that's just life happening despite our best efforts to control it?" Damien turned back to face her, his expression anguished. "You don't know what you're saying. You're confused, overwhelmed, mistaking intensity for. Don't tell me what I'm feeling." Elena closed the distance between them. "I'm not some naive girl who can't tell the difference between real emotion and Stockholm Syndrome. I know what this is, Damien. I know it's messy and complicated and completely insane. But it's also real. And you feel it too. I know you do. Feeling something and acting on it are different things." But his hands came up to frame her face, his touch betraying his words. "If I let myself love you, Elena, I lose everything. My focus, my purpose, my revenge. Everything I've built for 30 years crumbles because I couldn't resist. A chance at happiness?" Elena finished. "A chance at a real connection? A chance to stop living in the past and start building a future. Happiness is a luxury I can't afford. Then maybe you've been poor in all the wrong ways." Elena's hands covered his where they rested against her face. "You built an empire, Damien. $12 billion. Companies, patents, influence. But you're still that 7-year-old boy, lost and alone, convinced he doesn't deserve good things. When do you get to stop punishing yourself for surviving?" "Elena," his voice broke on her name. "Kiss me." The command surprised them both. "Not for practice, not for photos. Kiss me because you want to. Because for once in your carefully controlled life, you're willing to take a risk without knowing the outcome. That's a terrible idea." But he was already leaning in, his breath ghosting across her lips. "Probably the worst. Elena tilted her face up. Do it anyway. For one suspended moment, they hovered there, caught between wanting and should not want, between the past and an impossible future. Then Damien closed the distance, and his lips met hers in a kiss that was nothing like the brief brush at rehearsal. This kiss was desperate, hungry, the dam finally breaking after days of tension. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer as her arms wrapped around his neck. She tasted champagne on his tongue, felt the rapid beat of his heart against her chest. 30 years of loneliness, of rage, of carefully controlled emotion, all of it poured into this kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien pressed his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he whispered. I know. I don't know how to do this. How to want revenge and want you at the same time. Then maybe it's time to choose. Elena's voice was gentle. The past or the future? Rage or something better? You can't have both. What if I choose wrong? What if you already have? She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You've spent 30 years choosing revenge. How's that working out for you? Are you happy? Fulfilled? At peace? No, he admitted. But at least I know what I'm doing. It's terrifying because I have no map, no strategy, no guaranteed outcome. Welcome to real life. Elena smiled sadly. It's messy and uncertain and scary as hell. But it's also beautiful when you let yourself feel it. Damien kissed her again, softer this time. Tender. Like he was memorizing the shape of her mouth, the taste of her skin, the way she sighed against him. Tomorrow we get married, he said when they finally pulled apart. Tonight, I need to think. About what I want. About who I want to be. About whether I'm brave enough to let go of 30 years of rage and choose something different. Okay. Elena stepped back, giving him space even though every cell in her body wanted to stay close. I'll see you tomorrow, then. At the altar. Elena. He caught her hand as she turned to leave. Whatever I decide, whatever happens after tomorrow, you need to know something. What? You're the first person in 30 years who's made me want to be someone other than the man seeking revenge. That matters. Even if I'm too broken to do anything about it, that still matters. Elena squeezed his hand. You're not broken, Damien. You're healing. There's a difference. She left him standing alone in the empty restaurant, surrounded by the remnants of their performance, wrestling with the choice that would define both their futures. The car ride back to the fortress was silent. Marcus didn't ask questions, just drove while Elena watched the city lights blur past, replaying that kiss over and over in her mind. Tomorrow, she'd marry Damien Russo. Whether it would be a marriage of revenge or something real remained to be seen. But either way, Elena knew one thing for certain, she'd stopped pretending. Whatever happened next, it would be honest. Messy and complicated and potentially disastrous, but honest. And maybe that was the first step toward building something real. Or maybe it was the first step toward heartbreak. Time would tell. Tonight, she'd sleep alone in her beautiful cage, dreaming of a man who tasted like champagne and possibility, who held her like she was precious even while insisting she was just a weapon in his war. Tomorrow, everything would change. She couldn't wait. She was terrified. Both were true. Both were real. And maybe that was exactly how it should be. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the gauzy curtains and the surreal realization that today was her wedding day. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the fact that in a few hours, she'd be Damien Russo's wife. Mrs. Elena Russo. The name felt foreign on her tongue, like trying on someone else's identity. Her phone showed 7:03 a.m. and one new message, sent at 6:47. Damien, I didn't sleep. Spent all night thinking about what you said. About choosing. We need to talk before the ceremony. Meet me in the library at 8. Elena's heart hammered as she typed back, I'll be there. She showered quickly, her mind racing. What had he decided? Had he spent the night convincing himself their kiss was a mistake? Or had he finally admitted what she'd seen in his eyes, that he was falling for her despite every intention not to? By 7:50, Elena was dressed in leggings and an oversized sweater, her hair still damp, no makeup. If they were going to have a real conversation, she wanted to be herself, not the polished version she presented to the world. The library was on the second floor, East Wing, a room she'd only glimpsed in passing. When she pushed open the door, she found floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs, a massive fireplace, and Damien standing by the window with a cup of coffee, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He turned when she entered, and the raw vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. You came, he said, like he'd half expected her to run. Of course I came. Elena closed the door behind her. What did you want to talk about? Damien set down his coffee, running a hand over his head in that familiar gesture of stress. I spent all night thinking about what you said. About choosing between revenge and something better. About whether I'm brave enough to let go of 30 years of anger. And Elena's heart was in her throat. And I realized something. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I've been so focused on making your father pay that I forgot what I was really angry about. It wasn't just the money or the patents or even my father's death. It was the fact that Marco Russo died believing he was a failure. Died thinking he'd let his family down, that everything he'd built was worthless. Damien's voice cracked slightly. I wanted to prove him wrong. I wanted to become so successful, so powerful, that everyone would know the Russo name meant something. That my father's ideas weren't worthless, they were visionary. That Richard Hartwell was the fraud, not us. He shook his head. But somewhere along the way, proving my father's worth turned into destroying your father. And I convinced myself that was the same thing. Is it? Elena asked softly. No. The admission seemed to cost him. No, it's not. I've already proven everything I needed to prove. I built companies that changed industries. I'm respected, feared, influential. My father would be proud of what I've become. The revenge plot. That's not about honoring him anymore. That's about feeding a rage I don't know how to let go of. Elena moved closer, close enough to touch him but not quite daring to. So what are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to marry you as part of a revenge scheme. Damien's eyes were intense, burning with something Elena was afraid to name. But I still want to marry you. If you'll have me. Not as your captor or your father's enemy. Just, as me. Damien. A broken man who's somehow less broken when you're around. Elena's vision blurred with sudden tears. What about the contract? The arrangement? My father's debt. I'll pay off your father's debt anyway. Consider it a wedding gift. Damien's smile was crooked. But the marriage? That's not about him anymore. That's about us. About seeing if this thing between us, this messy, complicated, completely inadvisable thing, could actually become something real. You're asking me to really marry you? Elena's voice came out. As a whisper. Not for 7 months with an expiration date, but for real. I know it's insane. We barely know each other. This whole situation is toxic from the start. You have every reason to say no. Damien took her hands, his touch gentle. But last night, when I kissed you, I felt something I haven't felt in 30 years. Hope. The possibility of a future that isn't consumed by rage. And I want that, Elena. I want you. Not as a weapon, not as revenge. Just as you. What if it doesn't work? Elena's practical side was screaming at her that this was crazy. What if we get married and realize we've made a terrible mistake? Then we'll deal with it. Together. Damien cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall. I'm not saying I'm fixed, Elena. I'm still angry, still damaged, still working through 30 years of trauma. But I want to try. I want to choose you over revenge. I want to build something instead of destroying things. And I want to see if maybe, just maybe, we could be happy. Elena's mind was reeling. This morning, she'd woken expecting to enter a fake marriage with a predetermined ending. Now, Damien was offering her something real. Messy and uncertain and terrifying, but real. What about my father? She asked. What happens to him if you're not pursuing revenge anymore? He still loses his company. His reputation is already damaged beyond repair. But I won't go out of my way to destroy him. I'll just let him destroy himself, which he seems perfectly capable of doing without my help. Damien's voice was firm. My focus isn't on tearing him down anymore. It's on building something with you. This is crazy, Elena breathed. Completely insane, Damien agreed. We've known each other less than 2 weeks. 1 week and 4 days, to be precise. You're a workaholic with trust issues and a revenge complex. And you're a people pleaser with daddy issues and a tendency to sacrifice yourself for others. His smile was soft. We're a disaster waiting to happen. So why does this feel right? Elena's hands moved to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. Because maybe disasters are where the best stories begin. Damien leaned his forehead against hers. So what do you say, Elena Hartwell? Will you marry me? Not because you have to, not because your family needs you to, but because you want to. Because you're willing to take a risk on a broken man who's trying desperately to become someone worthy of you. Elena thought about her mother's warning, about broken people breaking other people. She thought about Adrian and the safe, comfortable future she'd given up. She thought about all the logical, rational reasons why this was a terrible idea. Then she thought about Damien's hands gentle on her face. The way he'd filled her bookshelves with her favorite authors. How he'd admitted he was terrified but willing to try anyway. The kiss that had tasted like champagne and possibility. Sometimes the heart knew things the head couldn't understand. Yes, Elena heard herself say. Yes, I'll marry you. For real this time. Not because I have to, but because I want to see where this goes. Because you make me feel alive in a way I never have before. Because even though this is completely insane. She didn't get to finish because Damien was kissing her, deep and desperate and full of promise. This kiss was different from last night's, less hungry, more tender. Like a vow being made before the official vows. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this, he murmured. We're really doing this, Elena confirmed. Though technically we were always doing this. We just changed the motivation. Slightly important detail. His laugh was shaky with relief. Elena, I need you to understand something. I've never done this before, the relationship thing, the vulnerability thing, the choosing someone over my revenge thing. I'm going to mess up. Probably often. I'm going to retreat behind my walls and forget how to communicate and be an emotionally unavailable workaholic. I know. And you're still willing to try? I'm still willing to try. Elena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But I need you to understand something too. I'm done being a pawn in other people's games. I'm done sacrificing my happiness for family obligation or social expectation. If we're doing this, if we're really building something, then I need to be an equal partner. Not your wife in name only, not decoration for your arm at events. A real partner. Deal. Damien's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes for the first time since she'd met him. Partners. Equals. Two disasters trying to build something beautiful out of our combined wreckage. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm rusty at romance. You'll have to be patient. I can be patient. Elena kissed him softly. But right now, we have a wedding to get ready for. And I have to go get my hair and makeup done and pretend I'm not having a complete emotional breakdown. Is it a good breakdown or a bad breakdown? Both? Neither? I don't know. I woke up this morning thinking I was entering a prison sentence, and now I'm apparently starting a real marriage with a man I barely know but somehow care about way too much. Elena's laugh was slightly hysterical. So yeah, definitely some kind of breakdown. For what it's worth, I'm having one too. Damien tucked a damp strand of hair behind her ear. But I think maybe that's a good sign. If we weren't terrified, we'd be idiots. We might be idiots anyway. Probably. But we'll be idiots together. He kissed her forehead. Go. Get beautiful. Though you're already beautiful like this, no makeup, hair a mess, looking at me like I've lost my mind. You have lost your mind, Elena said. We both have. But maybe that's okay. She left him in the library, her heart racing, her mind spinning, her entire future suddenly rewritten in a way she never expected. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Celeste arrived with her team of stylists, transforming Elena's room into a bridal suite. Margaret came, tears already in her eyes. Michael showed up with coffee and nervous energy. You don't have to do this, he said for the 100th time. We can still run. I've got Dad's credit card, we could be in Mexico by tonight. I'm not running, Elena said, watching in the mirror as the makeup artist worked. But thank you for the offer. You sound different, Margaret observed. Calmer. Less like you're being led to slaughter. Elena met her mother's eyes in the mirror. Damien and I talked this morning. Really talked. About what this marriage is going to be. And? Margaret's voice was careful. And we decided to make it real. Not a 7-month arrangement with an expiration date. An actual marriage. One we're choosing, not one being forced on us. The room went silent. The makeup artist paused mid-brush. Michael's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Elena, her mother said carefully, are you sure? You barely know him. This whole situation is insane. Completely illogical. Built on the worst possible foundation. Elena smiled. Yeah. I know. But Mom, when was the last time you saw me this, alive? When was the last time I made a choice based on what I wanted instead of what was expected? Never, Margaret admitted. You've been playing the good daughter your entire life. Well, maybe it's time I stopped. Elena turned in her chair to face her mother properly. I'm not saying this is going to be easy. Damien and I have a lot to work through. But for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm choosing my own path instead of following someone else's map. And that feels right. Margaret pulled her into a hug, careful not to disturb the makeup. Then I'm happy for you, sweetheart. Terrified, but happy. That seems to be the theme of the day, Elena murmured. The hours flew by. Hair styled in an elegant updo with loose tendrils framing her face. Makeup that enhanced her features without hiding them. The Ellie Saab dress that transformed her into something ethereal. Diamonds at her throat and ears, not borrowed this time, but a gift from Damien that had arrived that morning with a note, something old was my mother's. These are something new. Wear them if you want. Either way, you'll be the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. D. His mother's necklace. The gesture made Elena's throat tight with emotion. At 3:45, 15 minutes before the ceremony, Elena stood in front of the full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked like a bride, a real bride, full of hope and nerves and the kind of terrified joy that came with jumping off a cliff with no certainty of what was at the bottom. Ready? Michael asked, offering his arm. As ready as I'll ever be, Elena said. They walked through the house toward the garden, where 50 guests were already seated, where an arch woven with roses and calla lilies waited, where Damien stood in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. The music started, Pachelbel's canon, traditional and beautiful. The guests stood. Margaret was already crying. Aisha smiled at her with knowing warmth. And then Elena was walking down the aisle on her brother's arm, each step taking her closer to a future she'd stopped dreading and started hoping for. Damien's eyes never left her. And in them, she saw everything she needed to know: fear and hope, vulnerability and determination, the promise of a man choosing to heal instead of staying broken. When Michael placed her hand in Damien's at the altar, his touch was warm and steady. "Hi," Damien whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Hi," Elena whispered back. Officiant Harrison cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." But Elena barely heard the words. She was too busy looking at the man she was about to marry, really marry, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, disasters could transform into something beautiful. If you were brave enough to let them. And today, standing under an arch of flowers with the valley spreading out behind them and a man who'd chosen to heal holding her hands, Elena felt brave enough for anything. "Do you, Damien Alessandro Russo, take Elena Marie Hartwell to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Damien's voice was clear, certain. "And do you, Elena Marie Hartwell, take Damien Alessandro Russo to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Elena looked into his eyes, those complicated, beautiful eyes, and smiled. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the state, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Damien pulled her close, one hand cupping her face, the other at her waist. "Last chance to run," he murmured against her lips. "Not a chance," Elena breathed. And then he was kissing her, not for practice, not for photos, but because she was his wife and he was her husband and they were choosing this, choosing each other, choosing hope over rage and future over past. The guests erupted in applause. Somewhere, a photographer was capturing the moment. The sun was setting in shades of pink and gold, painting everything in magic hour light. But all Elena knew was Damien's arms around her, his heart beating against hers, and the wild, terrifying, exhilarating knowledge that she'd just married a man she'd known for less than 2 weeks. A man who'd started as her enemy and become, what? Her partner. Her choice. Her chance at something real. Time would tell. But as they walked back down the aisle together, hands clasped, both grinning like idiots, Elena thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd figure it out together. After all, they had more than 7 months now. They had forever. Or at least, the chance at forever. And sometimes, the chance was all you needed.